So good evening, everybody, or good afternoon or morning if you're watching on our Facebook live stream. I'm Gwen Robinson, past president of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand and editor-at-large of Nikkei Asia. And as we all know, we're here tonight to talk about a very, very important topic, beer in East Asia, a political economy. But before we start that, can I remind the audience that immediately we've got the Songkran holiday period coming up, and the club will be closed on Thursday and Friday for the Songkran holidays, but we will be reopened by Monday the 17th. And also to alert you that ahead of the Thai elections in mid-May, we have a good lineup of panels, including a panel on women politicians in Thailand, as well as other topics. World Press Freedom Day, there's a good discussion coming up for that on May the 3rd, and a number of other things. We have another Myanmar panel coming up. So please do keep an eye on our website and Facebook page. We're also organising a post-election analysis on Thailand with some experts immediately after the Thai elections, probably around the 17th or 18th. So again, please keep an eye on that. And just one little housekeeping announcement that the kitchen has asked me to make for those in-house. We have a special tonight of a cheese platter for 350 baht, if anybody feels like nibbling on cheese. So, turning to the subject at hand, and could we have a bit of silence there in the room, please? Turning to the subject at hand, which is this brilliant book. One thing that really struck me on reading this extraordinary book was the opening lines, penned by the two main authors and editors of this excellent compendium of essays. They're sitting right over there. I'll introduce them in a minute. This book begins by saying, this volume did not have to be written. There was no requirement for employment, and the contributors did not receive remuneration for it. Rather, the book resulted from a deep love for beer and a profound interest by the editors and authors in studying the political, economic evolution of beer, especially in various countries of Asia. Thus, this opus fundamentally centres around the question as to how and why beer developed in Asia until today. And I think, having flicked through it, that this is the real secret of this book. It was written because the authors were passionate about this subject. You might wonder when you see the price of the book, which is extremely expensive as it's an academic tome. We have 5 on sale here, but you might like to think about the price of that. You can also talk to the authors afterwards if you're interested in acquiring a copy. But as the book points out, beer, as we know, always a popular beverage, has risen to new heights in East Asia, and in recent years it's become more diverse, and increasingly, I think, in our region here reflects local identity. We've also seen in recent years East Asia become not only the world's largest beer-consuming market, but also the world's largest beer-producing region. So tonight we have an excellent panel of experts, and we will be joined by another one a bit later. And while the book goes into 10 key markets or beer-producing regions of Asia, we're focusing tonight on 4 prime examples relevant to where we are tonight in Southeast Asia: Thailand, Cambodia, Laos and Vietnam. Anyway, to get right on with it and introduce our speakers, on my far right is Paul Chambers, lecturer and special advisor at the Centre of ASEAN Community Studies, Faculty of Social Sciences, Naresuan University in Thailand. He is author of numerous works on democratisation and civil-military relations in Southeast Asia and the political economy of the Mekong region. But as far as I know, I think this is his first great work on beer. Similarly, next to him, Ajahn Nithi Nuangjamnong, Assistant Professor at Department of Political Science and Public Administration at the Faculty of Social Sciences, Naresuan University in Thailand, has also published on a wide range of topics, including comparative politics, international political economy, focused on East Asian studies. Again, unusually writing about beer here. Online, we have, online, Kuntam, have we got our online panellists? We have Martin Rathi, Australian researcher who has lived and worked in Laos for nearly 2 decades and has authored several works on Lao politics. And there we have Nicholas Chapman, Japan-based British researcher, writer and editor specialising in the politics and political economy of Vietnam. And last but very not least, sitting right here next to me is Philip Sherwell, Asia correspondent at the Sunday Times and a veteran journalist who's covered and consumed a considerable amount of beer over the decades. He hasn't consumed too much, I think, tonight, so we'll get a lot of sense out of him, I hope. Anyway, so let's kick off with Paul Chambers. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Gwen, for that colorful introduction. So this has been a project that was our dream, the dream of Nithi and I, which came to fruition. So we could say we have it, a tangible outcome. Unfortunately, yes, 3,000 baht was not something we were anticipating. But it does exist, so we can at least talk about it tonight. And so, you know, Nithi and I, we were the editors of the book, and we are the writers of some of the chapters, but other people were involved in writing this book. And as I think on the screen we saw Martin Rathi, who wrote the chapter on Laos. Okay, Nicholas Chapman wrote the chapter on Vietnam. We have a chapter on Japan, by the way, written by Nithi. We have a chapter on the Koreas, both South and North Korea, written by Brendan Howe. We have a chapter on Taiwan beer, written by Christian Schaefer. Let's see, we have a chapter on Philippines beer, written by Julio Tihanki and Eric Bataya. Chapter on Myanmar beer, military Myanmar beer, written by Richard Horsey and Tom Keene. So it was bunches of writers that put this together, and we thank all of them. Okay, so what do we talk about in our book, really, besides just beer? How are we talking about it? Well, first of all, we're looking at beer as, you know, as a commodity, something that has social and state actors who have played a role in developing it throughout the ages, right? And in each country that we examine, beer passes through a different historical path. And it's an historical path that has certain cultural anomalies, because every country is a little bit different. And so you'll see different certain periodic outcomes that have affected the development of beer. For example, when we look at Cambodian beer, the fact that Cambodia has been through so much war hasn't helped Cambodian beer develop as much as, say, a country that hasn't been through such, you know, anemic times, like Japan. Okay, so each country and case is a little bit different depending on the different experiences that that country developed. Okay, let's see. So last thing here, table of contents. I've got it. Oh, okay, thanks. Now, maybe you can all hear me. Okay. So, okay, so anyway, just to wrap it up here, before I talk about Cambodia, altogether, you know, these cases represent beer in East Asia. And yes, East Asia is one place, but then again, it's different places. Each has its own different experience depending on the country. Now, there are certain companies that have been able to have vast influence across areas of Asia. There's also global economic powers that wield enormous influence in the beer market in Asia. You'll hear again tonight about Carlsberg and Heineken, okay? And perhaps you'll also hear about how Carlsberg was unable to break into the Thai market, okay? But there are many different global capitalists, there are, and local actors that are playing roles in the beer market that really matter today. So with that, I guess that's enough for the opening, and I'll switch to the Cambodia chapter.
Go ahead. Paul.
Okay.
Keep it all tight, if you could.
Thanks. Thanks. So I don't, if you could find it. Okay.
All right, go ahead, Paul.
Okay, so since I'm still sitting here, I thought I would do the first country and titled chapter Cho Moi, which is the cheers in Cambodia. So you can learn some new terms if you don't know that already. And like in all of our chapters, we do use this theory of historical institutionalism. I'm not going to go into that. Basically, history matters, okay? And in every historical path, you have certain junctures in history that are very important that help determine the future. Okay, so what about Cambodia? Cambodian beer began in 1929, okay? It wasn't Cambodian beer. It was, it was Indochine, okay? It was a French colony. And the beer company was Brasserie des Glaciers de Indochine, BGI. BGI beer that they produced was called LaRue, okay? From the brothers LaRue, who in the 1880s began producing this beer, okay? BGI LaRue actually was still producing at least LaRue was, in Laos in the early 1990s, as I remember purchasing some of it there. But that's just a different story for Laos. But BGI influenced all of Indochine, okay? So Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, okay? But in Cambodia, we can just say that there was a colonial beginnings to beer. Then along came Norodom Sihanouk. And Sihanouk was a prime minister, but he was rather a dictator. He became rather a dictator. And not just that, he nationalized the beer industry. Okay, and he nationalized this, all of it, in the early 1960s, so that there were only two beers that were allowed. Okay, beer Encore and beer Bayonne. You could take one of two. So there weren't that many options. You're not going to find this vast craft beer industry in Cambodia at that time. But there was room for development because there was still peace in Cambodia. However, under Sihanouk, there began to be this pattern in Cambodia where it became a predatory state, meaning that all parts of the economy and politics were under a sort of a predation of powerful state control, and that under the personalized control of Norodom Sihanouk. We would see that pattern later on under a new prime minister. So basically, if any beer company wanted to do well, they had to have the endorsement of the prime minister, and his cronies ended up being in control of all of the state enterprises, including SKD, which was the alcohol board under which the beer Encore and Bayonne were produced. But Sihanouk was overthrown. There was terrible civil war. And we know that clearly that the Khmer Rouge took over. Well, Sihanouk was overthrown in 70, and then the Khmer Rouge took over in 1975. And the Khmer Rouge stopped all beer production. No beer production after 1975. Well, I mean, we probably could have figured that one. So here is the photograph of the old beer. That's what usually happens. But from 1975 to 1992, the only beer that people were drinking was beer that was coming in illegally from Thailand. Okay? Until, since 1992, there have been some changes. Okay? The government has revived the alliance between, you could say, global capital and local business people to bring forward beer, okay? And so the first company was Cambrew, 1992 to the present. And this company, which was started by a Malaysian, makes a beer called Encore beer, all right? It's now 100% owned by Carlsberg, okay? Then there's the Cambodia Brewery Limited, opened in 1994 as a joint venture between Asia Pacific and a local company. They make Anchor beer, which is, I think it's terrible. But, I'm sorry, I'm not being paid off. They make that, okay, that company now is 100% Heineken owned. So, tell you the truth, these two companies make the monopoly, basically, or the duopoly of beer in Cambodia, and they're both dominated by these foreign multinationals. We'll get back to CBL in just a second, though. There is another beer company, Khmer Beverages, made by the Chip Mong Group. Now, Khmer Beverages, you know, they sell this Cambodian beer, they call it. There it is. And they've been able to stay afloat, even though they don't do business with internationals, because Chip Mong is quite close to the Hun Sen family. And if you're close to the Hun Sen family, you can usually survive. And they've been able to do so, but only as like the third-ranking beer company. Then there is Medai beer. Medai is popular because it's very cheap. It's popular in the rural areas of Cambodia. I tried some, don't try it. Okay. I'm not trying to make fun of rural people. I'm from rural, but it's, don't try Gansberg, okay. But, by the way, Medai is a company that's also close to the Hun family. Okay, Watanak, I wanted to get to this. Watanak, which makes crud beer, it's supposed to be pronounced crude, not crud, but crude, it's actually one of my favorite beers in the world. I don't know, but it's not crud, it's crude. And it is a very new beer. Now, Watanabe is the company that was in an alliance with Heineken, but then Heineken bought up the whole bit of Anchor, and so Watanabe started its own company in 2020, all right? Now, Watanabe has been able to survive because, again, it's very close to Hun Sen. So much so that Sok Khan, the son of the late Council of Ministers President, Sok San, married Watanabe owner's daughter in a wedding attended and presided over by Hun Sen himself. Okay, so you got to have these connections sometimes to survive. Okay, another just example, Hanuman, this guy's close to Hun Sen. And then we have the ultra cheap beer. I took this picture of a guy that was getting drunk on cheap beer in Phnom Penh. Don't try Enter Madrid beer. Now, getting to the craft beer industry. I hope he's not here. So microbreweries have been a fast-growing movement in Cambodia, catering to urban, middle, upper-class Cambodians or to expats living in Cambodia who have palate for more sophisticated and diverse beers. These beers are thus relatively inexpensive and produced for limited consumption rather than mass distribution. But the initial drivers for the growth of Cambodia's craft beer market were institutional. High legal restrictions and prices for producing, distributing, and selling beer, okay? Basically, craft beer in Cambodia has been a huge sort of a revolution. There is, for like people who have the money, you can go places in Phnom Penh and find somewhat expensive beer, okay? At the same time, craft beer companies exist for Thailand, okay? Because there are Thai companies that want to produce and re-export their beer back to Thailand. And this is useful for the economy of Cambodia. So, ho, we love it. Cambodia definitely likes that. If that was not possible, then Cambodia's economy might suffer, okay? All right, so it's interesting. So here we have Cambodia's beer market structure, okay? This is according to Euromonitor. In 2022, okay, Carlsberg, Cambodia, which makes the Angkor beer, 30% of the market. Heineken in Cambodia, the terrible Anchor beer, 26% of the market. Okay, the Khmer beverages, 22, Medai, 14. These are really close to Hun Sen, as is Watanabe. Okay, and for the craft beer, it doesn't matter, 2%, because they're actually selling to people who have the money to afford that sort of thing. Okay, but you can see whereby what's happening under Hun Sen is sort of a repeat of the Norodom Sihanouk period, where you have a strong man who's been able to have a predatory economy over the country. To dominate the economy, anyone who wants to have success in their businesses will come to him. Now, that's true for Khmer beverages. It's true for Medai. Actually, it's also true for Heineken and Carlsberg, because they have to get his endorsement to do what they're doing as well. Okay? It all depends ultimately on the personalized control of Hun Sen. So, basically, conclusion is Cambodia is a predatory state dominated by a regime oscillating around one person, which maximizes the revenue of groups holding power, regardless of the effect on economic development, specifically promoting a powerful private interest such as those of politicians, bureaucrats, and the military. The state, political actors, private enterprises, and influences from abroad have shaped Cambodia's beer industry. The evolving path dependence of beer It's changed across the ages, and now since 1992, Cambodia continues as a predatory state, which encourages the development of beer. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Paul, for that excellent rundown, especially the recommendations of what not to drink in Cambodia rather than what to drink. I think you're starting a run on crude or crud beer, actually. Anyway, we're going to turn to the Thai beer industry next with Ajahn Nithi, but I'd just like to say a couple of words that after we're very lucky also tonight to have with us a key representative of the Thai craft beer industry sitting in the audience there, Kun Benz, head of Beer People, who will come up on stage after Ajahn Nithi and share some of his insights. I don't know if any of you have followed the extraordinary persecution of craft beer brewers in Thailand, but anyway, he can tell us a bit more. But for now, we will turn to you, Ajahn.
All right, thank you, Gwen, for your kind introduction and having me here with Paul. So let's start with like the topic, the title of our chapter. I guess maybe any of you, if like you visit Thailand 30 years ago, you might be like familiar with this phrase, happiness you can drink. So it's associated with the cluster beer. So it's now, I think, it's no longer in the market. So, but for the cluster beer, I have to say it is the loser of the beer market competition in Thailand. So I will like maybe I cannot go into detail about the story of cluster beer. All right, let me. Okay. I will divide the period in the Thai beer industry into 3 periods. The first one is the pre-1933. So at this period, I think we can call the civilization you can drink. Why? Because even though beer was first introduced into Siam during the late 17th century, but it's first imported as a large-scale commercial product during the late 19th century. And the Siamese elite at that time perceived beer as a taste of civilization and beverage advantageous to health. But right now it's like a totally changed the perception from like something that advantageous to health to something that really bad to health. At first, the Siamese beer market was dominated by imported, mostly from German and British beer. And later, after the World War I, the Japanese beer start to enter into this Siamese market and then dominate the market. So this is the statistic of the importation of alcohol to Thailand from 1918 to 1940. So you can see that beer only become the most valuable alcoholic import into Thailand only in 1931. Only that I mark in like in yellow in 1931. It means 2 years before the start of the Bunrod Brewery. So before that, you can see that the samchu. So we will have another book project. It's about the hush and hard beverage, hard liquor. So samchu is part of the hush liquor. So and you can see that it had dominated the Siamese market for quite a long time. Before 1931, that beer like surpassed the Hush beverage. Then enter into the market by Kun Bunrod or Bunrod Brewery. So I put the title at the dawn of change for Siam. This one is not the word from Kun Bunrod or Mr. Bunrod, but it's from King Rama VII. So who is Mr. Bunrod? He was the Sino-Thai entrepreneur who had really close connection with the palace from the King Rama VI to King Rama VII. He started applying for brewing license in 1931. At that time, you know, the Siam had only 11 local company. I mean, for Siamese entrepreneur, including the royal entrepreneur as well. So at that time, in 1933, we can say that the Bunrod Brewery can be considered as the most modern industrial project in Thailand at that time. But at first, when he started to apply for the brewing license in 1931, Ministry of Finance set various conditions, such as the government would not allow for the monopoly, and the beer tax would be collected at the same rate as the imported beer, and the government also put really high import duty for imported machinery. So you can see that from the very outset, the Siamese government at that time seemed not quite supportive to Kun Bunrod project. So Mr. Bunrod have to convince Ministry of Finance by traveling to Southeast Asia, probably to the brewery that Paul showed in the picture, to show that in neighboring country, they have no requirement for brewing license, and they did not impose domestic beer tax and have really a low import duty for machinery. So when he got back, he negotiated directly with the King Rama VII for special tax, and King Rama VII endorsed this project, and he said the introduction of local brewing company can help the country save money of beer import. He even compared this new project as the dawn of change for Siam. That's why I have the subtitle in this part as the dawn of change for Siam. So he also opened that the government should not issue brewing license to more than one company to prevent the cutthroat competition or, in his word, economic suicide. So this is why the monopolistic structure, beer industry structure was first introduced in Siam at that time. Even though after the change of the regime to the constitutional monarchy in 1932, Mr. Bunrod had to renegotiate with the new government, but Mr. Bunrod showed his political skill in can joining or can negotiating with the new power holder. So I will show you how Mr. Bunrod can align with the new government. He appointed the Vice President of National Assembly as board member, and he even applied for the membership of the People's Party Club. You know, at that time, the People Party, they did not allow to have the political party. So they have only the club. And Mr. Bulot was one of the membership of the People Party Club. And he even distributed the first batch of beer produced in Thailand at the People's Party Club dinner party. So that's how he can survive the change of the government. And less than 5 years of operation, Bulot Brewery control over 60% of the market share. All right. So next, from this picture, you can see the Field Marshal's lid. And the beer that I have to blur because I don't want to get into the legal problem. So it's for academic purpose only, right? This one is introduced by, actually not introduced, but endorsed by Field Marshal Service. It's called Bangkok Beer. So Service think that they have beer industry is really profitable. So he just want to make money from this profitable industry. And when he first invent the Bangkok beer, he even demand that our Thai bureaucrats must buy it. It in this sense is a Hanuman beer. So he even had a plan to nationalize Bunrod as well, but fortunately or unfortunately, he passed away. All right. So then, here comes the happiness you can drink. So another challenger of Bunrod dominant is the Amarit. So actually, Amarit beer was a reincarnation of Bangkok beer. But at first, Amarit failed to compete with Singer in the same market segmentation. That's why Amarit had to introduce the new market segment. And he imported, or he got the license from Kloster Beer, from German Kloster Beer. And he introduced this one as the premium market segment. So if you can remember, the Kloster Beer bottle is in green, and the Singer Beer bottle is in amber. So they use the color to identify the different market segment. But actually, Kloster is, for me, was quite success. It could control the market for 8%, can capture 8% of the market share. But the remaining 90% is still liberalization, lower the barrier to Grand Asia Pacific Brewery, and then San Miguel Brewery. At first, Beer Chang start with a cooperation with Carlsberg. And then it start brewing its own beer. And it took only 5 years for Chang to dethrone Singer Beer. I have one interesting detail. Each newcomer has really well connected to elite. For example, Chang has Mom Rajawong Adunkit as a chairman, and Heineken has Sarasin family. So you can see that's the recipe for success. In the beer market in Thailand, you need connection. For Chang's strategy, you may know the things like the beer plus whiskey or tie-in sale. If the shop want to sell really popular whiskey or hard liquor at that time, you need to buy Chang. That's the first strategy. Another strategy is like a market dumping or cutthroat price competition. You may like getting used to like 5 bottle for 100 baht or 4 bottle for 100 baht. So this how like the Chang can dethrone Singapore beer. All right. So this is the the data about beer market share. You can see that the Thai bev in yellow surpassed Singapore beer around like late 1990s, and then Singapore can like regain the control of the market only like in late 2000. So yes, with Leo, and the latest phase. So I call this as like a democratizing happiness. Kun Ben maybe better like mention this phase better than me. So we can see the movement of the craft beer, of the Thai craft beer. So actually the seed of revolution was sown in like early 2010 by Thai military Colonel Chit. His name is Chit, with Chit, so it's not like the dirty word. So he opened the craft beer bar and like a brewing academy. But the problem is the barriers to entry into brewing business is still high. Kun Ben can like talk about this topic better than me. So they still have like the minimum requirement and minimum like register capital and really complicated tax system. And I think Kun Ben can like tell this story about the craft beer movement like better than me. So my conclusion is, you can see that from the very beginning, political connection is like the most important factor in like founding the beer industry. And even though the Thai government tried to liberalize the beer market in early 1990s, but the minimum requirement is still high. So that's why people beer movement have to like start to lobby and to put pressure. And he himself, Kun Ben, he joined the student movement as well. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Ajahn Nithi. I just have to take issue about your point that to gain any success in Thailand in the beer industry, you have to have connections. I think that might apply to just about everything else in Thailand and, in fact, in Asia probably. But anyway, that was a fascinating rundown. We do have Kun Ben's, or rather Thanakorn, in the audience, but we're going to come back to you on this issue of the whole craft beer issue after our other two presenters. And I'd like to turn now to, I think it's, are we going first with, I believe, Martin, if you would like to present on... Nicholas, okay. Sorry, I'm just following the order here. Nicholas, so just to explain, Nicholas, right, your system is working. Yeah. It's Martin's system that's not working. Okay.
Yeah, my system's working just fine.
Okay, welcome, Nicholas.
Thanks for having me.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to share my my PowerPoint here. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Well, it's very, very tiny. Oh, that's better. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, thanks for having me. I did the chapter on Vietnam. I'm going to talk a little bit about the political economy of the Vietnamese beer industry. I labeled the chapter from bière to beer, the French word for beer, and to the Vietnamese word for bia, B-I-A. And like a lot of the countries in the region, Vietnam has historically not drunken beer, and it was introduced by its colonial masters in the late 19th century. And the historical legacy of colonialism has sort of set in path, has become self-reproducing and set a real path dependency towards a market that is dominated by a few major players. And that's the case, it was the case back then, and it's still the case today. So as Paul mentioned, BGI was prominent was a major player in the establishment of beer in Vietnam. BGI was set up by a former French naval officer named Victor Leroux with his brother in 1875. Was the first brewery to open up in Saigon, now known as Ho Chi Minh City. And in the north of Vietnam, another former French soldier by the name of Alfred Hommel set up a brewery in 1890. And these two breweries came to dominate or pretty much monopolize the early beer market in Vietnam. And the two did not really compete with each other. They sort of supplemented each other. So BGI set up a brewery also in the north in Vietnam in 1893, ice factories and ice cream shops. But the two really worked together, supplementing each other with technology, supplies. And as you entered into the 20th century, some smaller newer brewers started to enter the market, but these got driven out and quickly dislodged by this sort of informal alliance between BGI and Hommel Brewery. And as you entered in the 1920s, there was an increased investment from the French state to boost the production capabilities and brewing techniques of BGI and Hommel Brewery. And this unofficial partnership became official by 1933 with BGI merging with Hommel Brewery and Alfred Hommel's son, who had taken over running of the factory, being appointed to the board of directors. And so the domination of BGI and Hommel Brewery set in motion a path dependency for beer to be sort of dominated by only a few players. So as the Vietnamese War of Independence, first against the French, kicked off after World War II, Vietnam became split into two, as a lot of you may know, thanks to the 1954 Geneva Convention. So BGI moved its operations down south, and the Democratic Republic of North Vietnam moved in, and they nationalized Hommel Brewery and renamed it to the Hanoi Brewing Company. In the French retreat, the Hommel Brewery brewing master destroyed a lot of the machinery and equipment. But thanks to a former employee and experts from the Czechoslovakia, they were able to resume brewing beer, resume operations by 1957. Now, Hanoi Brewery, it was interesting because alcohol production in general was channeled towards the war effort. So the production and consumption of rice wine and wine was actually prohibited at this time for personal use. Beer was the exception. And the Hanoi Brewery was keen to sort of bring beer to the masses, because prior to this, it had been primarily a beverage for the colonialists. Yet there was a lot of difficulties in securing ingredients. They had limited bottling capabilities and rudimentary distribution network. And this was a problem compounded as the war grew on. And so to circumvent that, they came up with they turned to reusable kegs, which were plentiful, cheap to manufacture. They could be filled with beer brewed on site and then matured during transportation to suppliers. And this is what resulted in the north of Vietnam coming up with this, what they call beer hơi, which is just synonymous with North Vietnam. Some even say if you don't drink beer hơi after visiting Hanoi, you haven't really visited the capital at all. And this beer is unpasteurized, and it's very light and crisp, and it only has a shelf life of about 24 hours. So it has to be drunken very, very quickly. If you've lived in Vietnam for a long time, you may have been exposed to beer, some bad beer hơi and had a sick stomach afterwards. That's happened to me a few times. But it's a really, really unique experience about Vietnam. And the good thing about beer hơi is that the way it's brewed is it enables to operate at a very low price point. And it also suits the sort of Vietnamese preference for freshness. So this created what I call a dual track narrative, where you have, a unique culture in the north, and then the south, which is more traditional sort of bottled and canned beer. So during this time, BGI continued to operate in the south. They produced their two signature beers, Ba Ba, Ba meaning three in Vietnamese, which is now called Ba Ba Ba. After BGI left, the Vietnamese wanted to keep making it, but BGI held the trademark, so they just added an extra three. So now that's why it's called Ba Ba Ba. But operations during this time were really rife with poor quality control, lack of materials, and poor management. There's a running joke amongst GIs serving in South Vietnam that the South Vietnamese beer contained formaldehyde. But after the reunification of Vietnam, the Vietnamese nationalized BGI Brewery, and they renamed it Saigon Brewing Company. And so as Vietnam shifted into its economic renovation program known as Doi Moi, you saw the entrance of the foreign players into the Vietnamese market. Now, in the book, I call the 1990s to the 2000s the beer wars, because you saw the entrance of Heineken, Carlsberg, San Miguel, and Foster's. Most of them formed joint ventures with local Vietnamese enterprises. Beer LaRue made a comeback. I believe being taken over later by Heineken. And you had the upstart of some small nascent brewers. But these were quickly bought out by their foreign partners or squeezed out of the market because of the state's preference to channel investment and capital into these two dominant companies, Hanoi Brewing Company in the north and Saigon Brewing Company in the south. There was high barriers to entrance for these small companies. There was unfavorable tax rates, as well as a really crippling advertising limitation for these small breweries. That's why they all just faded away after the 2000s. But the state really worked hard to kind of cradle Hanoi Brewing Company and Saigon Brewing Company through this increased competition. Now, as you entered the new millennium, Vietnam ramped up what it calls the equitization process. Equitization is what you might think of as privatization, but the Vietnamese state likes to exert a certain amount of control over its state-owned companies, even after they sell a lot of their shares. And so Hanoi Brewing Company and Saigon Brewing Company were restructured and became what they are known as today as Sabeco and Habeco. Interestingly, Sabeco was sold, the government sold the majority of its shares of Sabeco to Thai Beverage in 2017, the biggest sale of a foreign partner in Vietnamese history. Habeco, they have tried to sell. Carlsberg, which maintains a sort of partnership with Habeco, is seen as the natural company to take over. But Carlsberg is really balked at the sort of government's high floor prices. And so what you saw is that the state began to sort of retreat and cede a lot of ground to foreign players during this time. Around 2015, the Vietnamese state also reformed its tax laws, lowering the barrier to entrance. And this is what some have called the fourth beer wave in Vietnam. You see the rise of craft brewing. You see on this picture, there's a two craft beers I enjoyed on my last trip to Ho Chi Minh City. They're infused with Vietnamese ingredients, local ingredients. Dragon fruit, the red one on the left is dragon fruit beer. The one on the right is a passion fruit IPA. And so with this rise in beer consumption, you also saw an increase in alcohol-related harm. And by about 2018, I label this part the state strikes back, and this is when the government tried to reclaim and put its foot down on some of the unregulated nature of the alcohol industry. And it instituted the Alcohol Harm and Protection Act, which went into force in 2020. And this, coupled with COVID, actually led to a very severe dent in a lot of the beer companies' profits. And as I said, the Vietnamese beer industry is really one dominated by, historically, until this day, has been dominated only by a few players. You can see here, this is the current makeup of the Vietnamese beer market. Sabeco making up 34%, Heineken 44%, Habeco 11%, and Carlsberg 8%. And this sort of nascent brewery, craft breweries and local breweries only makes up 3%. So that's kind of the state of the Vietnamese beer industry. It's one that's not monopolistic, but only dominated by a few players, and this really original colonial area. And you see this historical legacy of colonialism being self-reproduced again and again and again throughout the years. You also have this dual track narrative between the North and the South. And despite this, the beer in Vietnam is not a static product. It's been very, very unique. You have this beer hoi culture. You also now have these new craft breweries. So yeah, beer has sort of become embedded in the national consciousness of the nation, and Vietnam has become a real beer-loving nation, despite historically not being so. So that draws an end to my brief presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Nicholas. That was great, and hopefully return in question and answer. We will be having a Q&A at the end, so please save questions for any of the panelists. We're going to turn over to Martin Rathi now. Martin, are you there?
Yep, I'm there.
Australian researcher who has lived and worked in Laos for nearly 2 decades, authored several works on Lao politics and now beer. So over to you. I think you've got slides, but your camera's not working, right?
Yes, that's correct. So good evening, everyone. Sawadee Cup. So my presentation is covering bits that are not included in the chapter and touching on some of the features in my chapter, but all the images you see tonight are not in the book, so you have to get the book to see the alternative images. So my first title screen here is showing a few of the contemporary beers, except for the one on the bottom left hand, which is called Lao Beer, with beer spelled
We're not seeing the
B-I-A.
images there, Martin. Kuntam, can we have the slides?
We have some slides for Martin.
We have Martin's slides, please. Okay. No.
No, that's not it.
No, it's the next one. Sorry about that. Yes,
That's
and
okay.
his slides. Oh, it's there on your computer there. Sorry, bear with us. Bear with us,
all right.
Martin. We're just trying to get your slides. So can you operate?
No, it's not. We had it all set.
Yeah, I think it should. Okay,
Well,
here we
why
go.
don't you just keep talking, Martin, and Paul's just rushing to the rescue there.
Okay, so the Lao beer industry was mostly a monopoly until the last 15 years, and most people are very familiar with beer Lao. But in my chapter, you learn more about what existed before beer Lao and what has developed in the last 15 years or so. And beer Lao definitely dominates the whole market in Laos. It's what a main point that I want to make in my chapter is that despite using the national label and marketing itself strongly as a Lao product, beer Lao now is more than 70% foreign owned. So it's not the national product that used to be. So hopefully everyone can see my slide now. Is it okay? Just to check with the crowd. Okay, we might be still having problems. Can everyone see my slide?
No, we can't.
Okay, that's a bit strange. Maybe I'll stop sharing and I'll reload. It'll only just take a second. Excuse me.
Yeah, sorry, Martin, we're just, we've got an issue with, just bear with us.
Okay.
Okay, I've got it here. Paul,
Okay.
so
Okay.
Martin, just bear with us. We're just,
Yeah, fine, no worries. Okay, I can see. Okay, I think everyone can see it now.
not quite yet. Okay,
Got it.
we've got it. So, and also you might like to speak up just a little bit more, Martin. Your voice
Okay.
it's a little bit muddy. It's not
Okay.
100%
Is that
clear.
clearer now?
Yes, I think that's all right. Is that all right,
Okay.
everyone?
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
Okay.
My apologies, everyone.
All right.
It was
So
smooth as silk before.
we've been
Okay.
looking at your face for the last 5 minutes, so nothing wrong with that. But can you get that? Can you get that moving? Okay, there we go. It's not on this screen. Couldn't. Okay, there we go. All right. Okay, we're at the title page now. Can you see it, Martin?
Yeah, I can see too. I can see the FCC one is black and white and my one's more colourful. So I'll stop my share because you're seeing the black and white one, I assume.
Okay.
Correct? Yeah, just a
Okay.
moment.
So can you
Okay.
change
Yes,
the
here
slide
we go.
there? Okay.
We're good to go now, I think.
Next.
Okay, and I'll...
Okay,
Okay.
there's a nice colourful slide there.
Okay, here we go. So this slide is just to show sort of the evolution of the imaging of beer marketing in Laos, looking at the period beginning with the early 1970s when BGI developed BGL, its Lao extension, which later on became the Lao Brewing Company, which is LBC in the modern day. And you see these young ladies holding bottles of soft drinks and also Baba beer, which was one of the beers produced by BGL. And at that time, it was quite sexualized for the period. And through to about 2012, I have to double check the dates, but in the early 2010s, Beer Lao was very much not very politically correct, I guess you could say, but not too racy. But it mostly focused on women and enjoying beer in its advertising. But then it's blended a lot more in relation to Lao tradition and culture and society. And in this collection of images, you can see the image from a Beer Lao calendar in the center with the lady wearing Lao traditional silks. And in the background, there's an image of the Bun Bang Phai, the rocket festival, and the people playing the can and other traditional instruments in a field of Lao rice used to produce various Beer Lao products. And then in the bottom left corner, you can see a row of women dressed modestly in traditional Lao costume. And this image actually was modified later to add slogans. And then in more recent times, you can see Beer Lao has become very much with the times. So you see there it says International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and biphobia. So it's made quite a big transition in its imaging there in society. In my chapter, just skipping on to the next slide, hopefully it's doing its trick. You can, yep, thank you very much. I talk about how in the 60s and even earlier that beer was a lubricant in diplomacy in Laos during the civil conflict and the Second Indochina War. So these are archival images, and they show Pathet Lao revolutionary officials paired beside Royal Lao government officials and neutralists. So you can see on the far left the aide-de-camp of the last king of Laos enjoying a brew with the chief of the military in Huracan, the far northeastern province in Laos. And down the bottom, you can see a visiting Russian military delegation seated at a banquet, drinking soft drinks and beer Lao products. It's quite interesting when you read the different chapters how most of these companies use the production of drinking water and soft drinks to, CSR, like to build up their social responsibility image. So in Laos, there's Tiger Head water produced by the Beer Lao company, and it's donated in massive amounts to various government agencies and community events. Okay, and moving on to the third slide, please. Okay, thank you very much. So this is another pair of historical images. On the top left, you can see it's an image from the Tat Luang Festival, which is held in November most of the time, and it's showing Beer Lao, Beer Larue in the pavilion sign, and then there's the Bar Beer. And this image is interesting because you see the row of monks receiving alms, and you have the foreigners looking on, having a bit of a chuckle. So the blend of alcohol and traditional culture sometimes is a bit of a contradiction, but that's the nature of Southeast Asia. And on the bottom right-hand image, it's showing a Hmong New Year gathering. And so you can see the women in traditional Hmong dress there. And on that table in front of them, they're drinking Asahi beer from Japan. So this is being flown in by mostly American advisory services. And we see in the center of that image the head of the province, Prince Saikam, a Phuan prince. So in Thailand, there are ethnic Phuan people. And the man who's looking at the table directly, that's Mr. Tudi Lipung, who was a leading Hmong figure. So most people are familiar with Vang Pao, the military commander, but Tudi Lipung was more the civilian or parliamentary representative. So this is showing how beer was helicoptered into remote areas, and the international brands had unique access. And moving on to the final slide, so my presentation's going to be short and sweet for today, is looking at marketing in the modern day. So sweeping from across the top row, you see the new brew from the Beer Lao company, Luang Prabang, and the marketing of beverages with traditional food is a very strong trend. Lao people love their food. So food and beer marketed together is a very good recipe. Then the next image is beer Savan. This is beer brewed in Savannakhet province, and it's linking on to the festive season with the Merry Christmas slogan. Then you see the COVID-themed Tiger Beer advertisement with the youth sitting with a laptop and a smartphone while holding a beverage. Then you can see the marketing of Beer Lao in Thailand through large supermarket chains such as Tesco Lotus. Jumping down to the bottom row, you can see Beer Gold. And the interesting thing with the story with Beer Gold is that most of the marketing is done by Thai agencies, but they are promoting the Lao narrative, which I find a bit ironic. and so it's promoting the use of kalkai noi. It's a special form of rice that's cultivated in Sengkuang and Houaphanh provinces. And in the central image at the bottom of that slide, you can see the linking of tradition with Pimai or Songkran, as they refer to it in Thailand. And there's the beer lao truck in the background. And shifting to the last image in that slide is Core Beer. And Core Beer is the, I guess you could say, the flagship force in the craft beer industry in Laos. It's very small still. It's had challenges, but it's survived COVID and is steadily growing. It only has one base in Vientiane, but it has good connections, as the other speakers have referred to. Okay, so a bit of a hopscotch through history there and present times. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Martin. Great slides there. You didn't get the Beer Lao t-shirts, which are so popular around the place. They seem to have done very well. Anyway.
Yeah, that's right.
So next, before we turn to our discussant, Phil Sherwell, and some questions, I'd like to invite up to join us Kun Benz, Kun Thanakorn Tuamsanyam, head of Beer People, and thanks, welcome. As well, Kun Panu Wongchom has kindly offered to help translate. Panu, you don't necessarily, I think it's easier though maybe to sit together or come up here, perhaps, if you don't mind. And just to remind everyone, Kun Benz is now facing prosecution and hefty fines for simply posting photos of craft beer in recent years. And 1 week after hosting a large gathering of like-minded beer fans, he was charged with illegally promoting alcohol via his online community for Prachachon Beer People, and he's facing fines of at least 750,000 baht or $22,000. And I'll let him discuss the issue. So, Kun Benz, maybe you could update us on the situation as of now.
Hello. Sorry, I'm speaking a little bit. นิดหน่อย want to translate นะ โอเค โอเค เบื้องต้นผมอยากจะแนะนำเพจตัวเองนะแล้วก็แนะนำตัวเองสั้นๆก่อนนะครับก็คือ
I want to introduce myself and my page, which is a Beer People.
Yeah. Beer People. จริงๆผมเริ่มต้นการทำเพจจากความรู้สึกที่ผมไม่ชอบดื่มเบียร์ของไทยผมรู้สึกว่าเบียร์ของไทยมันไม่อร่อย
I started this page because I feel that Thai beer is not delicious.
แล้วเราก็รู้สึกว่าพอเราได้เจอคราฟต์เบียร์แล้วเราก็รู้สึกว่าคราฟต์เบียร์มันทำให้เรามีชีวิตของการดื่มที่ดีขึ้นเราก็เลยรู้สึกว่าอยากจะเข้ามาอยู่ในวงการคราฟต์เบียร์
When I encountered craft beer, I feel that drinking it just makes my life feels better. So I want to enter this world of craft beer.
แล้วก็พอเราได้เข้ามาอยู่ในวงการคราฟต์เบียร์เราเลยเริ่มรู้สึกว่าจริงๆแล้วคราฟต์เบียร์มันไม่ใช่แค่การกินดื่มแค่อย่างเดียวมันทำให้เรามีความสุขการกินดื่มทำให้เรารู้สึกถึงการเรียนรู้ที่มันมากขึ้นกว่าการดื่มแค่เมา
Yeah, and entering this world, it's not just about drinking the beer. I've learned a lot, it's just beyond the drinking. I've learned a lot about the process involved.
แล้วหลังนั้นผมก็เริ่มผลิตเบียร์เองก็คือทำโฮมบริวอยู่ที่บ้านก็คือเริ่มทำเบียร์ดื่มเองที่บ้านแล้วก็เริ่มมีการแบ่งปันให้เพื่อนมีการขายให้กับเพื่อนบ้างนิดๆน้อย
This is where I started my home brewery, and also I sell some to my friends.
แล้วก็พอผมรู้สึกว่าผมอยากทำธุรกิจเกี่ยวกับเบียร์จริงๆแล้วผมไปหากฎหมายดูก็เลยรู้สึกว่ากฎหมายมันไม่สามารถทำให้ผมไม่สามารถเข้าอยู่ในกฎหมายนี้ได้ก็เลยรู้สึกว่าต้องเปลี่ยนกฎหมาย
When I try to enter it in a business level, I start reading the laws involved, and I realize that, the laws, this existing law, would not allow me to enter this business. So I come to the conclusion that we need to change these laws.
ก็พอเราเริ่มเข้ามาปุ๊บเราก็พยายามรวมกลุ่มกันครับรวมกลุ่มกันความหมายของประชาชนเบียร์ก็คือเบียร์คนดื่มคนต้มแล้วก็คนขาย
So in the process of doing this, we created a group, and the group consists of consumer, as seller as well as brewers. So we have this close community.
ดังนั้นเราก็เลยเริ่มขยับโดยการเริ่มจัดกิจกรรมเราเริ่มจัดงานเบียร์เล็กๆของตัวเองตั้งแต่เราเปิดเพจได้ประมาณสักไม่กี่เดือนก็มีคนมาประมาณสัก 4-500 คน
สักปีไหนนะครับ
ประมาณสัก3 ปีที่แล้วก่อนโควิด
So 3 years ago we started to host events and it started small and we host events to promote these home brewery
แล้วหลังนั้นก็คือนี่คือรูปภาพปีล่าสุดที่เราเพิ่งจัดงานไปเมื่อประมาณสักเดือนที่แล้วก็มีคนมาประมาณสัก 5,000 ถึง 10,000 คนต่อวัน
This is a picture from
ประมาณเดือนที่แล้ว
sorry this is a picture from last month event 5,000 ถึง
10,000 คนต่อวัน
and there was we have 5,000 to 10,000 people visiting the festival every day
แล้วอยากจะบอกว่างานที่ผมจัดก็คือเบียร์ที่ขายในงานนี่คือเบียร์ที่ผิดกฎหมายประมาณ 90%
and the beer that was sold at this event 90% of them was illegal
ก็เราจริงๆเราอยากทำงานอย่างนี้เพื่อแสดงออกให้ภาครัฐเห็นครับว่าจริงๆแล้วมันมีกลุ่มคนที่พยายามเคลื่อนไหวและกลุ่มคนที่มีอุดมการณ์มีความสามารถในการทำเบียร์เยอะมากๆเราก็เลยรวมตัวบิวเวอร์ประมาณสัก200แบรนด์200บ้านทั่วประเทศอยู่ในงานนี้
So I want to show the government about our ability and the degree of interest through these events and we sort of bring together about 200 sort of self home brewers to this event
แล้วหลังจากนั้นเราก็เลยจริงๆแล้วเราไม่ได้มีแค่การจัดกิจกรรมแค่อย่างเดียวเรามีการไปรีวิวร้านเรามีการไปเปิดคอร์สสอนเกี่ยวกับการผลิตเบียร์เกี่ยวกับกฎหมายเบียร์
So the events include many other things like reviewing different shops as well as opening courses for people to understand better how to brew their own beer and stuff like that
และมีหลายเคสที่เราพูดถึงเบียร์ในประเทศนี้แล้วผิดกฎหมาย
And in many cases we've talked about how these activities are illegal in this country
ครับแล้วล่าสุดเมื่อประมาณสักวีคที่แล้วเราก็เพิ่งโดนกฎหมายเราเพิ่งโดนแจ้งความดำเนินคดีเกี่ยวกับการโพสต์การโฆษณาเครื่องดื่มแอลกอฮอล์ประมาณ15 คดี
And last week I was charged with 15 different offenses about posting illegally to promote alcohol online
อย่างเช่นตัวอย่างที่เราให้เห็นก็คือเรามีการพูดถึงการดื่มแล้วก็การให้ความรู้ซึ่งเจ้าที่ไทยก็ยังมองว่ามันเป็นเรื่องที่ผิดกฎหมายอยู่ดี
So some of these posts are just about create more understanding about brewery sort of the culture of it and so on and it is viewed as illegal by the Thai authorities
ครับก็คือตอนนี้เราพยายามเคลื่อนไหวในหลายรูปแบบมากครับเราทั้งให้ความรู้เราทั้งจัดกิจกรรมแล้วเราก็พยายามรวบรวมผู้คนให้ได้มากที่สุดเพื่อให้เกิดการเปลี่ยนแปลงทางด้านกฎหมายเป็นหลัก
So right now we want to provide knowledge, create events, and try to gather as many people as possible to create a force for change to these laws.
อย่างข้างในรูปนี้ก็คือเป็นโรงเบียร์ที่ญี่ปุ่นครับเขาเชิญเราไปรีวิวที่โรงเบียร์โดยการจัดการทุกอย่างให้หมดเลย
For example, in this picture is brewers in Japan, and they invited us to go there, and we were just explaining to our people about the details of this place.
ครับก็จริงๆอยากจะบอกให้ทุกท่านทราบว่าจริงๆแล้วกฎหมายไทยเหมือนเขาพยายามจะวางกรอบทุกอย่างตั้งแต่การผลิตการโฆษณาแล้วก็การช่องทางการจัดจำหน่ายให้มันยากเข้าไว้สำหรับรายเล็ก
Thai laws is basically structured as an obstacle for production, advertisement, and selling of a small scale producer.
ครับก็เราก็เลยพยายามดันทุกเรื่องครับที่เกี่ยวกับวงการเครื่องดื่มแอลกอฮอล์ไม่ใช่แค่เบียร์อย่างเดียวทั้งเหล้าด้วยทั้งสุราชุมชนด้วยทั้งไวน์ทั้งทุกอย่างที่เกี่ยวกับเครื่องดื่มแอลกอฮอล์เพราะว่าตอนนี้คนในวงการเครื่องดื่มแอลกอฮอล์ไม่มีปากมีเสียงให้รัฐไทยได้รู้เลยว่าพวกเขาต้องการอะไรบ้าง
So we try to gather and build a coalition not just among beer drinker or beer producer but also other alcoholic beverages, producers, small scale producers, whether it's wine, whether it's whiskey, whether it's whatever. We're trying to create a critical force basically.
เราก็หวังว่า นังสือเล่มนี้หรือการทำงานของเราก็จะทำให้ทุกท่านได้รู้ว่าตอนนี้จริงๆแล้วสถานการณ์ของเมืองไทยไม่ได้ปกติมันมีความผิดปกติมากๆจากตลาดเหล้าเบียร์ที่มีประมาณ400,000 ล้านแต่อยู่ในมือคนแค่ 3-4 คน
I want this book, I want this event, I want our page to show that essentially what's going on in Thailand, the Thai beer market is unusual. Where there's hundreds of thousands of consumer, but why is it only under the control of a few people?
แล้วในฐานะที่ผมเป็นแอคทิวิสต์นะเป็นนักเคลื่อนไหวเกี่ยวกับเรื่องพวกนี้เราไม่ได้ทำธุรกิจเกี่ยวกับเรื่องนี้เลยแต่ก็พยายามจะแก้กฎหมายโดยที่ใช้มวลชนมากดดันรัฐแล้วสำหรับผมรัฐไม่ได้มองผมเป็นแอคทิวิสต์เขาอาจจะมองผมเป็นอาชญากร
So as an activist, I'm doing this as an activist to change laws, not necessarily as a business, but as an activist. But the government doesn't view me as activist; they view me as a criminal.
โอเคครับก็ขอบคุณทุกท่านที่มารับฟัง
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you don't, is it okay to stay? Well, we'll just do some. So over to Phil. You have written some outstanding coverage of this particular issue, but also about beer industry or beer culture in general. So just wonder what your observations are and how unusual is this situation in Thailand in the context of everything we've been hearing about beer in Asia.
Yes, well, hello everybody. Yes, as Gwen said at the start, when it comes to this subject, I'm not an academic expert, but I do have some practical experience, both writing stories and consuming the subject that I'm writing about. And my role here, you described as a discussant.
Discussant, yeah.
Discussant, more maybe a lubricant, hopefully, for a conversation. But I did recently write about the craft beer movement here, and indeed I had the privilege to talk to Kun Benz here at the festival that they staged at Chatuchak. It's about a much broader issue than, in a way, just the right to brew, although that is obviously the core subject, but I think a lot of people who I was speaking to are also very motivated by greater issues of freedoms and liberties in this country in the face of a very top-down establishment system, which the Ajahns here were discussing themselves. It was not the deepest hardship assignment I've ever had to do due to the nature of the research. As well as going to at the festival, what was very interesting was talking to Benz and to several of these brewers who are brewing or selling their wares illegally, as Kun Ben said, under Thai law, was that they shared this, not all of them, not everybody you see in the picture, but some were, and the ones I spoke to shared this sort of epiphany moment that Benz had too, which is they hadn't really ever thought that beer could actually necessarily taste like nice. They'd been brought up on Sing and Chang, which I consume a lot of, and they're fine as staples, but they haven't got a lot of originality to them. And so they described with great enthusiasm having maybe gone on a business trip or having been snugged into somewhere where illegal beer was being sold in Thailand or provided, and just sort of their taste buds being alerted to the joys of this alternative out there. So they were very much motivated by a desire to share what they had the good fortune to experience. I also interviewed the Move Forward MP, Taupipop, who some of you may know of, who he was himself charged for illegal homebrewing a few years ago. He became an MP with Move Forward in 2019, and in this outgoing parliament, he has been leading efforts or led efforts to change the law with a progressive alcohol law that would deal with a number of the issues Kun Ben spoke about lowering the barriers to entry and easing these sort of kind of crazy non-promotion, non-advertising laws that mean that Benz can be prosecuted or charged simply for posting photos of beer I mean that in the presentation here for Thai beer, you saw the certain beers being blurred to avoid any misunderstandings. That was, unsurprisingly, his efforts, Taupipop's efforts were unsurprisingly defeated. They actually surprisingly came somewhat close to achieving a vote, but ultimately it was headed off and undermined by a sort of so-called compromise imposed by the Prayut administration, which really replaced one huge barrier to entry with another without going into the details of sort of Thai, arcane Thai statutes. And I did at the end, and I'm just going to quote him, I sort of asked him about continuing this battle to change the law. And he said, I would love to see this law changed, and then I could happily quit. But because he said, my dream is to open a small brewery on the Andaman coast, run a beach bar at night, and go spearfishing by day. But Thailand cannot deliver my dreams yet, so I have for now to remain an MP. That's his battle, his motivation. You've heard about Benz's. I guess I'll draw it to a close there with those sort of thoughts and observations about what I learned from writing this piece. And I would be interested to hear from either side of me, from the Ajahns and from Benz, whether they believe, having described this sort of elite-dominated oligopoly system, whether they actually see prospects for change, and whether they see a day when Thailand, like its autocratic neighbours Cambodia and Vietnam and Laos, can enjoy the freedom of free craft brewing.
Well, thanks very much for that, Phil. And the perfect quote from a craft beer revolutionary and advocate. But can I just not let you off the hook right now, but by saying that as a correspondent, you're now covering the election campaign full on. So you've been delving into what some of the political parties are saying and candidates. Do you personally get any impression that Taupipop for his party has any kind of prospect of more support if he does win a seat this time? Do you think amongst the other parties, other candidates, or do you think this is an issue that will again be defeated?
And Taupipop is my constituency MP in Klong San, and I had the good fortune to have to interview him in his bar, because he does run a bar in Klong San where he now brings his beer in legally from Vietnam. He has it brewed in Vietnam at the Heart of Darkness brewery. I think his hope is that this can be somewhat of a cross-party issue in the new parliament. I mean, he is campaigning and move forward to campaigning on a reform of the beer laws as part of their platform, and it's in his literature, which I sort of see in Klong San. But he did do surprisingly well in the last parliament of gaining sort of allies in other parties, and I think his hope is that it doesn't need to be a partisan issue. I think it's being a bit what shall I say, overwhelmed in the election by other issues. I think his best hope is that in a new parliament, shape of which we don't know, but that he could sort of find support in a number of other parties. Obviously, one of the other points that was being made to me at the festival was that, ironically, it's now ganja, marijuana, is now sort of arguably more legal or more accessible in this grey area under the current system that we see with all these ganja shops around the city, and growing it in the countryside, than access to craft beer. So, I mean, I think that gives a bit of inspiration that maybe a blur would allow a change. But up against that, they've got the two big breweries of Boon Rot and Thai Bev, who have obviously seen a vested interest in maintaining their sort of market share. Now, it's a bit crazy because, as all those pie charts for the other countries showed, craft beer will always be a niche market. It's never really going to threaten the interests of those breweries. Singha have done a slightly better job of trying to co-opt some of the craft beer industry, so maybe they will see a financial interest in it too. So I don't think there's no prospects of change. I think it's being a bit drowned out in the other debate during the election at the moment, but maybe down the line.
Thanks very much. I think I'm so glad you brought up ganja or cannabis, the cannabis boom it just seems insane that we're seeing this terrible persecution of craft beer activists. So perhaps some people might like to ask questions from the floor. We've got about 15 minutes, so we've got time for a few. Absolutely, could you please go to the microphone and introduce yourself if that's possible and ask a question there. Are you okay?
Hello, really enjoyed the presentations this evening. My question is,
Can you introduce yourself?
Josephine Price,
Thank you.
not a FCCT member, but a frequent visitor. To what extent are the various governments' tax revenues dependent on beer revenue? Because I've often found this to be a driver of government policy. So to what extent are these different governments reliant on alcohol as a driver of their revenue? So could we compare and contrast Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand?
Okay, I might suggest that the two main editors and authors on this book answer that question. Paul, as you have an overview.
I don't want. I'll answer for the two.
So the other thing, maybe, can I just throw in? I was really struck by that roughly equal market shares in some markets for the big ones like Heineken and Carlsberg. You've shown in these charts, but was it the Cambodia or Laos, I've forgotten which one, where you had a huge share for Carlsberg and then a tiny share for Heineken, which seems unusual because they seem to parallel each other. And at the moment in Myanmar, for example, with the collapse of Myanmar beer, you've got Heineken and Carlsberg are kind of basically carving up the market between them.
Yeah.
But anyway, on to the tax revenue thing.
Yeah, well, tax revenue.
Could you speak into the microphone, Paul?
Got it. Okay. So tax revenue, is important for all states, but the taxes that these large companies are paying, say, for example, in Thailand and in Cambodia, are less than you'd think. They have connections with somebody in the palace, and so that is the right kind of connection you want in Thailand. In Cambodia, the connection is with the king, who the real king is Hun Sen. You have to have that connection. And so your tax revenue is going to be not very high. I don't have the exact figures for you, but it's relatively low, and we make that clear in the book. Now, I don't want to speak for Laos and Vietnam, but I would say if Nicholas and Martin are listening, I would assume this. Do they want to speak for this?
Yeah, very briefly. I can see you there, Martin, Nicholas.
Nicholas?
Yeah, I mean, I have the figures for, I know in 2019, the beer industry contributed about $2.6 billion.
Well, what percentage of that is of the tax revenue?
Oh, if you think, I think the tax revenue for Vietnam is around 60 billion US dollars.
Right.
What is that?
So a reasonable amount, anyway.
A reasonable amount. And you saw that when I talked in my presentation about the alcohol harm and protection law that was brought into effect in 2018. In the debate in Parliament, a lot of the opposition came from members of the National Assembly who had strong links to a lot of these beer companies,
right?
Some with family members on the boards. And they were against, they were strong proponents of watering down the laws, and they were successful to a certain regard. So and a lot of them cited the benefits that the beer companies bring in terms of taxation.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A lot of it, I think, was more vested interest than necessarily financial reason.
Thanks. And Nicholas, I don't know if you wanted to chip in on. Sorry,
okay,
Martin.
Martin, yeah. So Beer Lao prided itself as the biggest tax revenue earner for the government in around 2010. It no longer holds that position, but it's in the top 10, and the government relies on that income because mining is not perpetual. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So, yes, yes.
ก็อยากจะบอกว่าจริงๆแล้ว กฎหมายเรื่องเกี่ยวกับภาษีเป็นอุปสรรคของคราฟต์เบียร์และสุราชุมชนของเมืองไทยมาก
So the issue of tax is a major obstacle for sort of the craft beer community in Thailand.
ๆเนื่องจากมันมีการเก็บภาษีที่ซับซ้อนกว่าปกติเรามีการเก็บภาษีจากราคาขายด้วย
So there's complex taxation. There's also taxation from the sales, the sales of it.
ก็คือยิ่งขายแพงเท่าไหร่ก็ยิ่งต้องจ่ายภาษีแพงเท่านั้นด้วย
So the higher the price, the higher the amount of tax you pay.
ทำให้การผลิตสุราชุมชนหรือคราฟต์เบียร์รายเล็กเนี่ยซึ่งมีต้นทุนแพงอยู่แล้วต้องจ่ายภาษีแพงขึ้นไปอีก
So this makes sort of community craft beer or sort of home community-based alcohol beverage, which already have a high production cost, have to pay even a higher level of tax.
มันทำให้พวกเขาไม่สามารถเข้าถึงตลาดที่กว้างได้เพราะว่ารายได้ของประชาชนไทยต่ำมากๆ
So this means that these producers have very limited access to the market because people's income are very low across the board.
เราก็พอจะทราบอยู่ว่าจริงๆแล้วต่างประเทศมีการให้แต้มต่อเรื่องภาษีกับรายเล็กกันหลายที่มากก็คือการจะสร้างบิวเวอรี่หรือการจะผลิตสุราขนาดเล็กเนี่ยภาษีจะน้อยกว่ารายใหญ่เป็นเรื่องปกติแต่ว่าที่เมืองไทยจ่ายภาษีเท่ากัน
So in sort of outside of Thailand in many places the government provides subsidies help the little brewery to let them pay less tax than the big producer. But here, basically, we pay the same amount.
ก็ทำให้ตอนนี้คนที่บริโภคคราฟต์เบียร์ได้ก็คือคนชนชั้นกลางหรือคนชั้นสูงขึ้นไปสามารถดื่มคราฟต์เบียร์ได้
So craft beer is only available, mainly for middle class or sort of higher class consumers.
ครับก็คือจริงๆแล้วมันก็เป็นอีกเรื่องนึงที่เราควรต้องแก้กฎหมายเป็นเรื่องต่อไปหลังจากการผลิตแล้วหลังจากการโฆษณาแล้วหลังจากช่องทางการขายแล้วผมก็เชื่อว่าการแก้กฎหมายเรื่องภาษีก็ควรเป็นหนึ่งในนั้นที่ควรต้องแก้
So basically beyond fixing the laws on production, advertisement and selling of these craft beer, we also have to address the taxation issues.
Okay. Thanks. Very good point. And Ajahn Nithi, do you want to say anything? Just very briefly.
Yeah, I think tax has never been an issue or problem for the big company because they can pass that burden to consumer. So, but it become the big issue for a small brewer. And another a big a barrier to entry for the small brewer. Okay.
Thank you very much for that. And if there's any other questions, yes, Leah, if you, I guess you can.
Yes, okay. Just a
Can you
sideline.
introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am Leah Shortino from C Junction. It's another public venue here in Bangkok. My question is a side question a bit. I am curious whether you have any of your chapter on issue of gender related to beer selling. Because we know, I mean, even in the presentation of Laos, the beer girls have been quite popular in Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. And maybe they are not the user, but for sure they incentivate use of.
Who would like to take that?
I didn't totally understand the question.
And maybe we could apply, well, okay, Leah, you're saying that he wanted the clarification that whether the use of gender, well, I guess you're talking about the use of beer girls, like
Beer girls to sell beers. And
Right.
there are
Okay.
many other gender
That's
aspects,
true.
right?
Yeah, so we're not seeing a whole lot of beer boys
I
selling
haven't
beer.
seen any.
So it's really a comment on that, but maybe we could also turn that question to Kun Benz about whether it works in craft beer. I haven't seen much sort of sexy girls selling craft beer.
โอเคผมอยากแชร์ครับพอดีเมื่อประมาณสักเดือน2 เดือนที่แล้วผมมีโอกาสได้ชิมเบียร์จากเด็กผู้หญิงอายุประมาณ10 ขวบ
So a few months ago, I tasted a beer from a 10-year-old girl.
ก็คือคุณพ่อเป็นโฮมบริวแล้วก็สอนลูกให้ต้มเบียร์ตั้งแต่อายุ10 ขวบ
Her dad was a home brewer and he taught his daughter to make beer since she was 10.
แต่ว่าน้องไม่ได้ดื่มนะครับก็คือคุณพ่อชิมแล้วผมก็ชิมทุกคนมาช่วยกันชิมแต่ว่าน้องเป็นคนทำ
Of course, she didn't drink the beer, but I tasted it. Her dad tasted it.
Let's keep that one off the record.
ใช่ครับแต่ว่าตอนก่อนหน้านี้ก็มีคนหลายๆคนที่เป็นเบียร์แบบคราฟเป็นคราฟเบียร์ที่เป็นโฮมบรูครับประมาณสัก 4-5 เจ้าเขาจับมือกันทำเบียร์เป็นแบรนด์ที่เป็นแบรนด์ชื่อแบบเธอก็พยายามจะทำเรื่องนี้แต่ว่าด้วยความที่กฎหมายมันทำให้ทุกอย่างมันดำเนินธุรกิจยากเขาก็เลยหายไปจากท้องตลาดแล้วผู้หญิงประมาณ 3-4 คนมารวมกันครับ
So like in the past in our networks, we found that there was actually several women home brewers that joined hand and tried to produce a beer called Ter or She in English in Thai. But I think it didn't really work out.
เพราะว่ากฎหมายมันทำให้เขาดำเนินธุรกิจยากทั้งแบบโดนเรื่องการโฆษณาด้วยทั้งโดนเรื่องแบบเรื่องภาษีด้วยเขาต้องไปต้มที่กัมพูชาหรือเวียดนามเพื่อจะเอาเข้ามาขายเขาก็เลยไม่สามารถทำได้ตอนนี้เขาต้องหยุดไปแล้วครับ
So yeah, they were hit hard by sort of tax issue and then all the legal obstacle. They tried to take this brand She to brew it in Cambodia, but it didn't really work out. So that was the obstacle.
ก็คือง่ายๆคือการโฆษณาครับถ้าเกิดเช่นง่ายๆคุณบอกว่าเบียร์ตัวเนี้ยเป็นเบียร์ที่ดีมากอร่อยมากคุณก็ผิดกฎหมายแล้วครับ
So it's about advertising. You said that this beer is great, it's delicious, then you already breached the law.
Okay. Can we also just point out if from experience in Japan and China, the Kirin beer girls and the Asahi beer girls and also in China, those posters now are so sought after. So still seeing a lot of girls on beer posters. Okay, final question, sir.
Sam Wright, amateur beer drinker. On behalf of the beer drinkers, I'm curious as to why no one's mentioned the proof of the beer, how strong they are, how weak they are, and wondering if there was a chart in your summary of your book that ranks the beers for the strongest, like Singa's got to be somewhere up there. I've had Belgian beer, that one beer, you're done for the night. So any comments on proof?
Okay.
It's a good question.
I've got an answer. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great question. The reason we don't have that is because our book focuses on political economy. And so if we had such a chart, it would be more of a generalized nature of beer. So, but I would like to see that chart.
Right.
But we don't have it, sorry.
And next project, yes. Oh, no, well, Paul, do you want to talk about your next
the next
project
project.
before we close, Paul?
Well, the next project is called...
This is a scoop, everyone.
The sequel, stay ready, the sequel is called Hooch and Hard Liquor, a Political Economy. So that'll be the next thing, and who knows if that
So
works
that's
out.
about the legalization of marijuana as well as...
Well, we haven't thought about marijuana yet, but for example, in terms of Hooch, we're talking about like village rice wine, and some of them have some religious connections.
Right.
And we're also just talking about, poor man's whiskey. But then we get up to, more expensive types of whiskeys and just other types of hard liquor.
Okay. Well, we'll do another panel when you get that book out.
Hey, okay, thanks.
But finally, maybe with Kun Ben's on this question of alcohol content of craft beers. Does that vary a lot? And is that an issue? Is there an actual limit on alcoholic content of beers, or it's just about alcohol? Yeah, on that question about alcoholic strength of beers. Is that roughly commensurate with craft beers?
จริงๆที่ไทยก็มีคนทำเบียร์ตั้งแต่เบียร์ 0% นะครับจนถึงประมาณสัก 20% ที่เป็นโฮมบรูนะครับโฮมบรู
I've seen that's a wide range. So in the Thai producer, there's from 0% to 20% alcohol.
Wow,
in the craft space.
Pretty strong beer.
ใช้เวลาทำประมาณ 2-3 ปีครับ
20%.
ใช่ครับ
The 20% takes about 2 to 3 years to brew.
And to recover from, right? Yes,
Like
exactly.
a shot of beer.
That's a good point. Okay.
Well, I'm off to research that, and I'll see you in 2026.
I think that's included in Hooch, Paul. Anyway, so we're out of time, and I would really like to. That was an excellent rundown of everything you ever might have wanted to know about beer in Southeast Asia, and I'd particularly like to thank our impromptu guest, Kun Benz. Good luck with your case, and our impromptu interpreter and our recent past president, Panu Wongchum, as well as the great speakers, and also our excellent tech maestro, Kun Tam over there, and all of you, thanks for coming and also tuning in. The book, as I said, is available if anyone can possibly afford it, but otherwise, I'm sure that
Your saleswoman. Yeah, we'll be sanitized. Free PDF copy.
And it's also discounting quite heavily on Amazon. Anyway, moving right along now. And thank you, Martin and Nicholas, online there. And please watch our website, FCCT, for our upcoming events. And happy Songkran to everyone. Thanks.
มีโอกาสจะแปลเป็นไทยไหมโอ้ยากเพราะว่าสำนักพิมพ์นี้เขาคอมเมอร์